No, I just want to know a lot about this place.
Oh, okay.
About the museum, the history of this place, and a lot of the stuffs in. Those are the most important things that we want to know.
Okay.
That we want people to know all over the world.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. International
Yeah.
here.
You're saying here?
Oh, well, I was just saying, so for this exhibit, because it's a traveling one, it doesn't have anything specific to our area, so we did these two banners. So this shows the 8 sugar beet farms that were in the region. So if we're here, the closest one to us was Glencoe. And this other panel right here, this is on a local man named Jan, who was actually at the camp, and the Glencoe Historical Society actually interviewed him. Or a gentleman from the society interviewed him. And so then they were able to give us the interview and a bunch of the information. But the rest of the exhibit covers all across Canada. So you can see here, even on this map, because people were displaced during World War II, mostly from British Columbia, because that was where they were most worried, I guess, about the Japanese Canadians during the war. So they were spread all over the country, and some sent back to Japan as well.
Okay.
So yes, this is a traveling exhibit. It's here till February 15th, and then it actually goes back to BC. And then we rotate our exhibits throughout the gallery every kind of 3-4 months. So this is here till February. Actually, then we'll have an art show. A local artist is doing one. And then our summer exhibit, I don't know if I want to tell you yet because we're still working on it.
It's just fine. It's just fine.
Yeah, but
and I'm sure I'll be part of the event.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I'll be there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, okay, so the art show I can tell you is happening in March. Will be the first one for next year. And then kind of April until end of July and maybe early August, we'll have one of our shows that we curate here. We're playing around with a couple of different ideas. Right now we have a 1830s printing press in our collection, and it's actually being fixed up because it was broken, and so we'll be able to use it for programming, and people will actually be able to come and use this piece of machinery from 200 years ago.
Okay.
So that's why we're playing around with, once it's fixed, can we do a little exhibit around it? So we do change up and have our own content, because we've got 35,000, over 35,000 items in our collection, which is housed in a back building.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's good. What about here?
Yeah, so this, the exhibit follows the story of 7 families, and some of the families have artifacts relating to them. So this baseball glove, as well as the ticket, and the other artifacts in this case all belong to or relate to this gentleman right here. He, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head, he actually was part of the local Japanese Canadian baseball club in BC, and so that's why this is one of his symbols in the exhibit.
So if I heard you well, it means that Japanese contributed in some important things in Canada in those early times.
So yes, they did. The purpose of this exhibit, so do you know much about the Japanese displacement during World War II?
Not that much.
No? Okay, that's okay. So this exhibit talks about that. So in World War II, especially after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, Japan was then officially at war with Canada, and one of the great fears, even if it was a misguided fear for the Canadian government, was that the Japanese Canadians that were here in Canada were secretly spies or sending messages back to Japan or all of these things, and that fear came from a lot of different places, and so a lot of Japanese Canadians, especially from British Columbia, because British Columbia, on the world map is closer to Japan, were displaced and taken out of BC and moved across Canada, as well as some deported back to Japan, so that they lost that connection and they were monitored. Some were placed into internment camps. Some, like in southwestern Ontario, went to work on sugar beet farms, like Jan here. So those people were taken out of their homes, and unfortunately for a lot of them, they lost their homes, all their possessions, their jobs, their businesses, and it was a really terrible thing that happened to them.
Yeah.
The government sold a lot of their properties for pittance. Like, for example, this document's pretty good about this. So this one family bought this property for 1,600. Now keep in mind that was in the 30s. And then during displacement, it was taken out from under them and forced to resale for quite a bit less.
$980. Wow.
But then the government parceled it off and resold it.
Wow.
For that much money. So, like, people lost everything. Like, some people lost absolutely everything. Some people, like, I don't want to say everybody did, and I don't want to say, like, some people had a good experience, because I can't speak for everybody, but from our interview recording that I was able to listen to from Jan, they, in Glencoe, were treated, actually, sounds like they were treated quite well. They were excited to be there. For the most part, he was 18 years old. He wasn't there for a long time. He wasn't even there for a full year. And it sounds like the town was fairly welcoming to them. Now, that is very specific, and I'm sure that did not happen everywhere, and I can't speak to everyone's experience, but just speaking from listening to his interview, it sounds like he did okay for himself.
Oh, that's good. And I see there's some other stuffs here that look like some African tools.
So these are from this gentleman here. So he worked on a fishing boat, and his family grew up in a fishing town. And so these are his father's tools from the fishing boat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So these are they're the names here of the types of tools. You can see that the Nomi. I'm going to say their names wrong. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so basically chisel, axe, plane.
Oh.
Yeah. So these artifacts are traveling around Canada from the museum. So they're not ours. They're on loan to us.
That's good then. Yeah. And here there are some Chinese books. I don't know if they are books or they're just letters.
So Japanese, they are... diaries. The books themselves are actually copies of some of his diaries, business cards. Like he's got one of his business cards in there.
Yeah, I see there's some business cards.
Yeah.
And this, I don't know if it's an attire or something like.
Yes. So the book is from the general store that the candy and tobacco store that she worked at.
Oh, this is what they used those time, like a receipt, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow.
The fabric is part of her kimono. So you can. This is why that's her symbol.
So. Yeah. When they are doing those karate and some other things, the martial arts.
Well, the kimono is used for a lot of different things. It's often a ceremonial robe.
Okay.
It's not just used in martial arts. I don't know if they would wear specifically kimonos, because kimonos typically are like long all the way to the ground. So for martial arts, then obviously it's because it's like a wrap, right? So it's like or a dress type. I don't want to call it a dress.
And these are type of the bags they used maybe for business.
These are their luggage ones. So this whole part of the exhibit shows the displacement, and it's supposed to give the sense of moving because they were forced onto trains all over the Canada.
Okay. So they could use this maybe to carry their important documents, maybe their clothing.
They were able to bring with them. A lot of people weren't able to bring a huge amount. One of the interviews that's over on the other side talks about how they were a family of 6 and they weren't able to bring, a lot of clothing, a lot of their personal possessions. So one of the girls talks about how she brought some of her like paper-based documents because they were lighter and easier to carry, and then the clothing, like whatever they could literally just carry on their backs when they were displaced.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Interesting story. Is there anything the other side maybe?
So this is still an extension. This is still the exhibit. So the first part is really the introduction of their stories, and then we move into this side. So these 2 stations here show the protests, people wanting to protest. Obviously, there are land, property, everything being taken. So each one of these booklets has a little summary as well as copies of the documents in them. Some of these people were, one of them in particular that the story talks about, she was actually deported back to Japan and her husband was arrested. And so it talks about that. So one of the gentlemen it talks about how his business was taken from him, and he left the business in the care of a manager, but then the manager sold it from out of him. So anyway, it talks about their letters of protest to the government to hopefully get some of their money back, or at least get their property back or something. So a lot of these two tables have that. And then this side here is kind of showcasing the end of the story, or of these specific people's stories. And then this thing right in the middle here, it actually has a lot of interviews from different people. There's a couple people like on here that are in here, but other than that, these are just extra stories.
Okay.
And then this is the end of the story, Canada renewing their promise. What can we do now? How do we move forward? And it also does link it to what happened to the Indigenous people in Canada, because a lot of them were displaced. All of the residential school system, people equate things. So this just talks about the end of the story.
Wow,
So,
that's good. Thank you for the interesting story. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to watch this and know much about the Japanese in Canadian, Oh.
Yeah, and I mean, in the summer or like even in the early spring, we'll have an exhibit that's more specific to Stratford Caradoc, because as our mandate, we do exhibits that relate to the area. We brought this in because people don't realize that it does relate to the area, so we were spreading that history.